All right, Sean. Sean, so you have an interesting career. You work as a, what do you call it?
I'm a sexual assault nurse examiner, sometimes referred to as a forensic nurse examiner.
And this is in Northeast Indiana.
Yes.
And so you're working with people who have been assaulted.
Yes.
Probably all ages, right?
Yes, we provide the medical forensic exam for individuals that have been sexually assaulted. My youngest patient was 35 days old, so about this big. My oldest patient was 94 years old. So we do the entire lifespan as well as go to the morgue for a deceased individual if there is a suspicion that sexual assault occurred.
Wow. So you must see all kinds of stuff.
Indeed, I do.
Does it affect you emotionally? I mean, personally, you're
yeah, I would be
earlier,
weird if it didn't. Yeah, it's...
You were telling me earlier you like to carry a gun with you everywhere you go.
Yeah, for protection. Yes, I do. Yeah, it affects me. It affects the people that care about me. It affects everyone. It's a stressful job. I mean, what you do, you're hearing things all day long. I hear them, see them, collect evidence, and it's hard. Vicarious trauma is real, and I feel like I'm pretty mentally tough, but there's times that we all just don't do so good, especially when we go to the morgue, especially when it's a kiddo.
Yeah. What got you into this field?
Well, ironically, I had never even heard of forensic nursing, and I had worked as a lactation educator for like 7 years for the WIC program. So I was all about women's health. I wanted to work in like labor and delivery when I got in nursing school. That's where I thought I would start and retire there. And so I got a job when I was in school, third shift. I went to school during the day and then worked third shift at the hospital. And I was in the nursery because I was low man on the totem pole. So I took care of the babies in the nursery. And I actually really enjoyed that a lot, and I knew I could bring the breastfeeding part of it into it to be able to help moms, you know, right after they've had the baby and stuff like that. So it was going to be a good way for me to get my foot in the door. And a couple months after I started there, I had one of the charge nurses come in and she said, Sean, we had a fetal demise, and I'm going to need you to like take care of that. And I'm like, I knew what fetal meant, and I knew what demise meant, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'd never got that memo. That was not part of my job description at all that I can recall. And I just kind of stared at her, and she's like, I've got 2 other moms in labor. I've got to go attend to them. I need you to clean this baby up, try to find some clothes that fit them, and get like the keepsake photos for the parents if they decide they would want those later. And I kind of was just looking at her like waiting for some guidance, and she's like, I've got to go. She's like, you'll be fine, Sean, it's over there in the corner. And I'd been in this nursery for like 2 months. I never knew what this little room was off to the left. So I just she left. There was nothing like, hey, it's your first time, I'll like walk you through it. It was just like, shh. And I went into that room and it was like very dimly lit, and there was like a little table with like this little mound on the table with the receiving blanket over it, and there was a very distinct smell in there, which was the first thing I noticed. And I was like, well, I'm cleaning this baby up. So I like got a basin of warm water and brought it in a washcloth. I put some gloves on and I pulled back this little receiving blanket, and it did not look like a baby to me. And baby was very tiny. And all I know is I had to do what I had to do. So I was told what to do, so I started doing it. So I started cleaning the baby off, and I just remember vividly the smell again was horrendous, but it was like the skin was starting to kind of slough off of the baby, and I was like, well, what, I'm gonna take it down to the muscle? Like, I was like, this is like not something I can do. And I don't even really remember the rest of doing that, other than I did it. I got it done. I did it. I got off work. I went home. I drove back home, got my kids off to school, and had to leave and drive 45 minutes up to where I went to school. And I went to my classes. I acted normal, I guess. And on my way home, as soon as I got in the car, it was like the floodgates opened up. And I was just like, what the heck? I hadn't even had time to process it at that point. And I was just like, I can't believe I had to do that. And then I felt selfish that I felt like that, because I'm like, I'm worried about what I had to do when there's parents that just lost their baby. And it was like a lot of weird emotions that I had not had about anything remotely like that up to that point. And I'm like, this can't happen very much. Surely if I stay in this department, I am not going to have to worry about doing that hopefully ever again. Well, that was not the case. So that happened a few more times. I know this is a long way about getting to the question you asked.
That's okay.
But the irony lies in when I left that job. So I had to do that, I think, at least 4 or 5 more times with the fetal demise. And I finally, just one night, I was like, I can't do this. I mean, I'm tough, but my psyche, I was in nursing school. I was under a lot of stress. I was like, I can't do this. So my boss worked days. So when she got there, I kind of got her attention, and I went into her office and I said, everyone here knows I'm not a wuss, because I'm very tough and I don't ever want to appear weak, and not that there's anything wrong with that. But, and I said to her, I can't do this. Like, more power to the people that can. I have a lot of, I don't even know the word. I'll give them a lot of credit for the people that can do that. But I can't. I cannot hold and move dead babies and take photos of them. I can't. Well, ironically, at this point in my life, that is one of the things that I have to do. In a much different location, under much different circumstances. And now, when I look back, those were horrible circumstances, obviously. That's supposed to be the happy place in the hospital, not where people are going home empty-handed. But what I do now is, when I go to the morgue and it's a little child and little babies, I am touching them and moving them and collecting evidence and taking photos. So never would have I imagined at that point, when I absolutely thought I can't do this, I would be doing it, and under what I have to say are worse circumstances, because not all of the kids that we see at the morgue have died at the hands of their abuser, but some of them definitely have. And that involves things where I'm seeing vaginal injury, anal injury, ruptured spleen, subdural hematomas, bleeding from head to toe, bruising from head to toe. And the tiniest body bags you've ever seen, which is very disconcerting, obviously. So that's only one part of my job. Most of the patients I see are alive and going through a lot themselves, obviously, by the time they get to me. And we provide that medical forensic component. But we also, offer medications for sexually transmitted infections. We provide them with referrals for counseling services, follow-up to get more testing, HIV prophylaxis, all that kind of stuff that we don't have available in-house. So I will say this, and some people might disagree, but more important than anything that I can do as far as evidence collection, all of those things, the way that I treat people when they come is by far what I do that's the most important thing. No one's coming to us for a good reason, ever. And anyone that walks through the door has suffered something horrible. Sometimes they can't remember because of drugs and alcohol being involved, but they have, and your body keeps score. And I know that the way I treat people has an impact, and it can improve the outcome for them by being treated with respect and dignity right after something like that happens. I still don't think I answered your original question of how I got into it, okay?
It's okay.
So when I was in nursing school, after that the fetal demise stuff, I was in a forensics class, and I'd taken a few forensics classes, some psych classes, stuff like that, and we had a speaker come in, and she actually works where I work now, and she came to talk to us about forensic nursing. And I'm like, I could totally do this job. I'm very methodical and detail-oriented, and I had never heard of forensic nursing. I'd heard of rape kits, because a lot of people hear that terminology. I don't think I've ever said that. Unless I'm saying you may know it as, or referred to as a rape kit. You see it on TV, you hear about it that way, and really that is what we collect. We have a box, and evidence is put into the box. Sometimes we have to bag other evidence up, but she came and talked to us about that, and I listened, and I'm like, I think I could do that. So I waited outside of the classroom, and when she came out, I said, hey, I really think forensic nursing is something I would be interested in. And she was like, little did I know at that time how much people tell us that. Because now that I've been there for a long time, you hear it. I just heard it at the pool yesterday. And, oh, what a cool job. I would love that job. And I'm like, yeah, right. You have no idea. You want to be on call all the time, have no real personal life, and carry everyone's baggage along with you. And I just kind of smile, which is what my coworker did that day. So she said, well, after you graduate, hit us up and maybe we'll have something for you. And she was being genuine, but I could tell it was kind of like, yeah, right. So it was only a week or two later, I was on our university website, which I never get on. I don't know why I was on there. I have no idea. Other than maybe that was just, I was supposed to be on there. So it said pediatric assistant, and it had listed the same place where the lady came to speak to us. And I was like, it had no job description, anything like that. So I went ahead and made a phone call. They had me come in for an interview, and then they hired me. And it was very interesting. I was an assistant, so I didn't do anything besides, it was pediatric assistant, so it was all the child population. So it was 14 and under back then. So that was my first taste of listening to little children tell us how they had been abused. Some of them thought it was normal because that's all they knew. Some kids know, they will talk about smells, they will talk about how things made them feel. And that was that was difficult. It wasn't easy. And again, I'm like, why do I get into this kind of job? What the heck? But I knew that I could have a huge impact there. And I saw the nurses and what an impact they had on the patients. And so I continued. And I will say, to hire people in school as a pediatric assistant was a good job, very smart of them, because it would be the perfect weed out process. Because if you couldn't hack it doing that, before you are able to actually collect evidence and do all that, you're not gonna make it there. So I did make it there, and then I went on to get my finished my degree, and then I went through all the training to become a sexual assault nurse examiner, and then the preceptorship. So initially you have like a education portion, and then your preceptorship is where you follow the experiencing. So I did that for the adult adolescent population, and then I did that for the pediatric population. So all in all, that takes about 1.5 years. And I was doing other jobs while I was doing that. So I was doing some hospice, some long-term care, pediatric nurse. I was busy working like every weekend, and a lot. I was working a lot, knowing that at some point I would only work where I'm working now. Again, the deeper you get into it, the more difficult it becomes, because it's just more baggage every day. In some cases, hits you harder than others. And I will say this, one of your interviews with Eve from Connecticut, she talked about afterwards, and her stuff was so horrendous, I can't even imagine. But she talked about how 99% of the cops were really good, because we work with law enforcement, DCS, all these people, and get to know them because we work around them so often. And when she said that, how that one cop acted with her in the car, it ticked me off. Then she went on to say how crappy the nurse was that collected her evidence. And that irritated me to no end. And I will say this, forensic nurses are a different breed, and they're very passionate about what they do. And if I had to guess, she was probably an ER nurse that it was already taking care of 2 or 3 patients. I'm not justifying her behavior, because I know we all have baggage, but when you start taking care of your patients, you have to be there for them. You can't bring your baggage into a lot of jobs, but nursing especially. And how harmful that was to her, and how much that hurt her by being treated the way she was by that nurse. Because I think she was kind of like, here, I just get on shift and this is the first thing I have to do. I'm thinking, man, I got to get up in the middle of the night all the time to come do these cases. And I would never think of complaining to a victim of sexual assault. Well, so I feel like this needs to be some redemption for sexual assault nurse examiners. Again, I think it was probably an ER nurse that was really busy.
And this was thrown on her.
Yeah. And because a lot of times they're asking people to do it that aren't trained to do it, or they've only done a couple. In some states, you open this box up and it's got like instructions that could take you an hour to read. I've never read the instructions in there. We don't need to. That's part of what we learn in forensic nursing, because those instructions mean nothing when it's based on the disclosures that are made or not made. Because, you know, if I have a kid in the morgue that's deceased, can he tell me what happened, or can she tell me what happened? No. So I have to go based on, I don't know what happened, so I am going to do absolutely as many swabs and collect as much evidence as I can.
And you're asking questions?
When they're alive, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like what you do is a hybrid of law enforcement and nursing.
Well, there's a distinct difference only because I'm the medical component, and they are part of all the investigatory stuff. So every question I ask, really, and we have to make that differentiation because of testifying and stuff like that, because we don't work for law enforcement, we don't work for Department of Child Services. All of my documentation becomes part of their investigation. So the questions that I ask, I'm really asking them more for, it guides the forensic exam. So if they can't remember something again, or they don't know, then I'm collecting virtually everything I can. If they can specify things that happen, I don't want to have to, would I want to have to do anything below the waist on somebody that's already been traumatized that nothing happened down there? And that's what some states will have nurses do. We don't need to do, we can do a head-to-toe exam, but there's no reason for me to collect evidence from a female sex organ when everything happened orally or something like that. Because especially for a child, they're not going to understand why you're doing any of that. So yeah, the exam itself is totally guided by that. So are the medications that we offer, all that type of thing. And I will say, I treat my patients with such compassion, but I'm a straight shooter. I'm super easy to get along with. And they feel comfortable because luckily, I'm very blessed that I can build rapport with people pretty quickly, or it would make my job very difficult, I think. But I almost always make people laugh while they're there at some point, because I'm very sarcastic too. And I know who to do that in front of and not. And you figure that out very quickly.
Sometimes adding a little levity, some humor to the situation, because you're dealing with the most horrific, traumatic things you can imagine. You know, and somebody's like, I get crap sometimes on these interviews where I'm almost laughing at the absurdity of some story that somebody's telling. Not laughing at that.
No, when I hear you laugh, it's the same time I'm laughing when I watch your videos.
Yeah, because it's like, as somebody who's dealing with this stuff all the time, that's how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Because to not do that, you just break down and cry.
Well, absolutely. And the kids, too. They're like, you're funny. I'm like, well, I'm glad I can make you laugh. And that's when they're sitting there telling me things like, you know, because I will always ask a kid, did anyone ever tell you not to tell anyone? Because that's really important. You can get a lot of perspective from asking that question. And you hear some horrendous things. You hear like, well, yeah, my dad said not to say anything or he would kill me and my mom and the dog. Okay. I understand why you didn't say anything, you know, because when I talk to a kid, I've never treated even the littlest kids like babies. I never talked to my 3 kids like babies when they were little. And I think that's why I had kids that were very mature and reading when they were 4 and stuff like that, because I wanted them to have fun and have a childhood, but at the same time, I don't know. I just wanted them to be not walking around like, oh, I need this, or oh, I can't. I'm whining. I don't care for that.
How much of the sexual assault you see comes from? Is it 100% from men, or is it something?
Oh, absolutely not.
Really?
Nope. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say most of the perpetrators are men, but some of the worst perpetrators and accomplices I know are female.
Really?
Yeah. Because we all know there's crappy parents out there. I was very abundantly blessed to have amazing parents, but there's a lot of crappy parents who don't protect their kids. And that's something that's really hard for me to listen to when I have a kid tell me, well, I told my mom and she didn't believe me, like 2 years prior, and this has continued to happen. And there's times when I'm really tired, I get emotional. Not like not like that, but just people can tell when you're kind of getting emotional. And I've had kids before, like say I've gotten 3 hours sleep in 3 days. They tend to hit you harder when you hear something really sad, which is most of what I hear. But these little kids, they're looking into your face and they're asking to go home with you because they feel safe already. Because I have boundaries. I am a structure person. I don't let these kids bounce off the walls and act a fool when they're there. I'll give them a little bit of leeway, and then I'm like, now you're going to sit here. We're going to talk about that. You can go, honey. You don't have to be here, because everyone has a choice. The adults and the kids. We don't do anything that people don't want us to do there. Not that people are like, oh yeah, I got to go over there and have evidence collected. But at the same time, I let everyone know, I'm really proud of you for coming here. You're very brave to come see me. And I'm so happy I'm the nurse that gets to take care of you. And anything that you don't want to do, you don't have to do when you're here. You don't have to have photos. Even if mommy and daddy say yes, you're the boss. That's scary sometimes, telling a little kid they're the boss. But I want them to know they have control over that situation, because they absolutely had no control over what happened to them. So the answers that we get from that, like, yeah, telling mom she didn't believe me, or mom was a part of the sexual abuse, or mom was making their kid do something to a stepdad, or let's do this and video it and it's put online, or, I mean, we hear everything. And one of those times when I was really tired and a kid, I mean, Lord knows, because we hear so many things, what they were saying to me, it was a little boy, I just remember that, but my eyes just filled up with tears. I was just like, I can't handle this. I already had so many patients in a very short period of time. And this kid just broke my heart. And I remember I looked at him and I'm like, oh no, because I could feel it. Like I could feel I was starting to like My eyes filled up, and he noticed it immediately. And he looked at me and he's like, and here's this kid who was just sexually assaulted and had been numerous times. And he said, "Are you okay?" I almost lost it when he asked me, because I'm like, seriously? And I said, "No, actually, I'm not really, because I'm sorry that no one protected you." And that's, with the kids, that's the hardest, because I can't fathom. I was such a protective mom, and if you ask my kids, I'm far too protective mom, because you're supposed to protect your kids. And that kid was just like, "Right, but you're taking really good care of me." And I'm like, "Right, because I care about you." And I know that when we provide that initial care to them, even though it had been happening for a long time, one of the other things I say is, when I first meet them, I'm kind of jumping around, but when I first meet a family, let's just act like they're kids at that point, I'll tell the kid and the parents, I used to say, "I will treat you just like you're my own family." Then I realized a lot of families don't treat their kids good. And most of them understood what I meant, because they could tell the sincerity in my voice. But at the same time, I had to rethink that. Because one time I joked, I said, "And I treat my family good," because they looked kind of, and then I went, ooh, the fact that I even said that was weird too. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. So what I started saying, what I've been saying for years and years, it's along the same lines. But I say, "My name is Sean, I'm the forensic nurse examiner, and I am going to treat your kiddo just exactly how I would want my own family treated." Is it kind of the same? And are there crappy people who might not want their kid treated well? I don't understand that. Again, I feel like it's safer when I say that, because some people didn't have a good mom or dad, and they get what I'm saying. My main thing is telling them how brave they are, especially the kids. And I also say, did anyone tell you that this isn't your fault? And they just stare at me. And just recently, I had a little boy say, "Are you going to be mad at anything I tell you?" And I looked at him and I was like, "No." And he goes, "Well, Mommy and Daddy were mad." And I said, "Honey," because I had already met his parents. Very appropriate, good people. Not that people can't seem good that aren't, but. And I said, "I'm a mom and I'm a grandma. And most of us want to protect the people that we love. And because somebody did something to you that they shouldn't have, Mommy and Daddy are upset, because sometimes we feel like we should have been able to protect you, or we're just upset at the person that did this, or there's a lot of things." And I said, "So you're seeing a lot of emotions in Mom and Dad right now. Anger, maybe saying words you're not used to hearing. They say they want to go kill this person, all kinds of things, but they're not mad at you. They're mad about what happened, but they're not mad at you, and they don't blame you." And that's when I found out that some people do blame their kids. Because I had a little girl one time that said, "Mommy said it was my fault because of the nightgown that I was wearing," and she was 5. So I'm like, well, no, it was not your fault. It absolutely was not your fault. And I'm sorry that was said to you, because it was this person's fault, and they did something that was really bad. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. Kids are much more resilient. Those are the ones that impact me the most. I'm not saying every sexual assault that I deal with doesn't impact me, but those like are a gut punch, the kids, when they're just sitting here telling you that stuff, especially when you know that it's gone on for long periods of time. I mean, your videos are the prime example. Your interviews that I've seen. I don't know if you've heard of the ACE scoring system, but the ACEs, they're the adverse childhood experiences that have happened to some of the people in your videos. It's amazing that they're alive, a lot of them, because
that's why so many are in drugs.
Yeah, exactly. The higher your ACE score, and I had a couple, but these people have a ton. And when I literally will calculate their ACE score sometimes while I'm sitting there watching them, because it's so hard to listen. Your videos are not easy to listen to. I'm sure you know that. But I appreciate you having them there, because so many people stick their head in the sand and purposely don't make themselves aware of what's going on. And that's hurtful. I mean, my daughter and I see homeless people all the time when we're walking down by the river. And just having eye contact with people makes a huge difference. We wonder why people feel like they have no worth. And then people can't even look them in the eye. And I used to, be like, oh, they're going to ask me for money. But I would still always say hi. And, how are you, or whatever, and you do. And when I'm on the trail, I don't have money with me. I have nothing besides, some like self-preservation weapons on us sometimes. Yeah, no, we have other things, but because you have to be safe. But the homeless people have not been the people that I've ever been that scared of. There's been other people that have made us. I heard my daughter switchblade one time, chink. Like in 2 seconds it was out, and I was like, good for you. You are definitely my daughter. And she was right on it, because my hearing is not that great the older I get. And she heard something, and she had it out in 2 seconds. But back to giving people dignity and showing them their self-worth is the biggest part of my job. And that's what I would want to convey. I wish I could change things for people. I can't, especially by the time they get to me at my job. I wish I could change things. I wish I had a magic wand and could take it all away. I can't. But what I can do is treat people well. And I was brought up in a Christian home, and I made a lot of mistakes growing up. And but I always knew I had unconditional love at home, and that's very different from a lot of the people that you interview. And sometimes I think I almost feel guilty that I had such an amazing family. And then I'm like, no, I'm so blessed that I had that. I wish more people had that, because the outcomes would be so much different. I know some of the stuff that happened to me, but because I had that firm foundation at home, probably a lot of people sitting, a lot of people sitting on the sidelines praying for me from the time I was little up till right now, because my parents are probably nervous about me being here. Because I thought, when you first called, I thought it was like AI, like artificial, until I was like, this could not be him. And I asked my dad, do you think it's AI? What if it's like a human trafficking ring? Obviously, I have trust issues from the job I do. Yes. I mean, even like coming up to this room, I knew that was you. I knew it looked like you, but I was still like, oh my God. Another reason my brother was here. So, yeah, trust issues, baggage.
You see the worst of the worst.
We do, and whenever I think that I can't see something worse or hear something stranger or worse, sure enough, I get proven wrong. Many times I get proven wrong in that.
What's the worst thing you've seen?
The worst thing I see, I have to be obviously careful because of HIPAA. By far, dead children that died at the hands of their abuser. Now, I will say that there's times that I've thought, as horrendous as that was, because there's been some really bad ones, I never had to hear what happened. And sometimes for me, I'm an overthinker. I can't even, it's a toss-up between which one's worse. Obviously, a dead child is horrendous, but the kids that are able to tell me everything too then I know, I have full knowledge of what happened. And I just wonder, and I just literally will pray for these kids when they leave.
It's got to be so difficult to let the kid go. He's going back to his family, right?
Yeah, and sometimes the perpetrator, DCS, Department of Child Services, will always be involved if it's anyone under 18.
And sometimes separate them.
Yeah, and I know that, again, they have a very high ACE score right away in life. And, unfortunately, even foster families, I've taken care of a lot of foster kids who were sexually assaulted in foster homes because of either other foster kids or foster parents. I am not like my dad. I love my dad to death, but he's changed a lot over time. I think he always wanted to think the best about people and that people were good. And there are a lot of good people. There are. You have to find them, but they're out there. But there's so many foster parents that it would be hard to have foster kids, even when you're doing the best, you're awesome people. You want the best for people. I don't even know how you keep an eye on a kid that's been sexually assaulted, because unfortunately they can also become the next perpetrator, which is scary too. But we've had to send kids back into homes where I didn't feel like they felt safe, because that's not my choice. I don't get to make that choice. And I have a lot of respect for Department of Child Services, because I see what they have to deal with. They're dealing with a lot of the same things we are, and they have to make scary choices sometimes. And you're trusting that a mom's going to get rid of that stepdad or their boyfriend that's been molesting their children. But the system's not always going to know if they allow those people back in the house. So I really can't. I know which one was the hardest on me emotionally, and it was a dead kid in the morgue that was literally every inch of that kid had injury, and having it in the worst places, because anytime it's anal, vaginal, anything. And because I do overthink and obsess about things like that sometimes, all I could think about was what was the last few minutes of that kid's life like, and that I just hope that when maybe they got hit in the head first, that they were out at that point, that they died quickly. And I don't know, it's really weird, because like two of us usually always go to the morgue. And my coworker, it seems like her and I usually are stuck together going those same days. And she had a kid about that age, that same age. And it was very difficult on her, very difficult. And we're both talkers. And I remember on the way back after we left that day, and we had really good law enforcement there that day that kind of warned us what we were in for, that it wasn't just like a kid that looks like they're sleeping. It was much worse than that. And I don't think we spoke, and like I said, we're both talkers. I don't think we spoke one word the whole way back to work. And then when we get there, you're not done at that point. I mean, you think, oh God, you should be able to like decompress, like do whatever. But no, you immediately go, because you have to dry the evidence, package the evidence, start your documentation. And I think on that one, I had at least 5 hours just in charting the injury, because we chart everything by hand. So you're like looking at the photos again, for the next so it was like. Now, that being said, that day normally I can go home and I'm weird. I'm acting a little weird. I feel like you're just like in this weird space. But it's usually a couple days after I do those where it just like
hits you.
Yeah, just like that day when I was driving home. And yeah, and that's why literally, and who in their right mind, would be watching your videos to relax? Because I do other things. I mean, I listen to music, I listen to podcasts, I play pickleball, I swim, I paint rocks and hide them around for people to find. And actually I painted you one, but I left it downstairs because I was stressed. And just to like, I have to do things that bring me joy and can take me out of that space when I get in a funk because of one of those cases. But that same case I think I had 5 more exams in the next 2 days because I was on call that weekend. So I didn't process it till Monday, and Monday was not a good day. I had that day off and I was just like, what in the heck even, like what is going on? That one has stuck with me as far as visually the most, because I see it, I could describe it to a T right now. But that's the visual part of it. The audio part of it, there's stuff that I've heard that I can never unhear. Never unhear. Stuff that I see that I can't unsee. Stuff that I hear that I will never unhear.
You've been doing this job for how many years?
13.
How have those 13 years changed you?
I was very untrusting prior to this job, so changed me.
You're aware now of how evil the world is sometimes.
I knew that before. But
like doing these interviews, I'm shocked at how many people have been through sexual abuse.
Well, and I think that's kind of why, because somehow yours was suggested to me. I don't even know what that meant, but somehow it was suggested to me, and I started watching them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are like my patients. And these are like people who are self-medicating. And, when we talked about the ACEs before, the higher the score you have, the more that you answer yes to, it increases your risk for chronic health problems, suicide attempts, mental health issues.
Drug abuse.
Yeah. Sexual assault is such a horrible thing, but at the same time, I want people to have hope, and I don't want them to feel like that they are defined by what has happened to them. And I think, again, that's part of what I want to do in my job. I want people to have hope when they leave. And I always, after the exams are over, even the youngest kids, I'll be like, is that as bad as you thought it would be? Because they have people going, well, you're going to re-traumatize my kid, or, oh my God, I watched this on SV, Law and Order SVU, and it's horrible. And I'm like, I'm not telling you this will be easy, but I can assure you that I'm the perfect person to take care of you today. And you will feel empowered when you leave here. I don't know how you're going to feel 24 hours from now. I have no control over that. But while you're here, you will feel safe. You will feel listened to. You will know that you had good care provided. And you will know that there's something different about me. And you won't know what that is, but you'll know.
Would you say your job is fulfilling and rewarding?
It's fulfilling. It's absolutely fulfilling. It's just hard.
Yeah.
And like there's days, literally, I'm like, why am I doing this? Because I can help people. And that's what I want to do. And there's the days I'm the most frustrated because it can be a very toxic environment. Because again, there's no one coming there for a happy reason. I do a lot of teaching and educating, and those are the only people walking through our doors that it's happy, because they're coming to learn about it, which is not happy for them usually. But I love educating, and it's kind of healing as well to do that. So people know more about it and they're more aware.
What do you think the solution is to the amount of sexual abuse we see?
As negative as it sounds, there is none. It's always been happening.
I mean the good parenting that you described.
It's going to continue, right? But I had good parents, and it happened to me.
Yeah, no, but more good parenting would probably put a big dent in it all.
Yeah, it's pornography. People don't like to listen to this or hear this. It's not a popular thing. But the accessibility of pornography now, and the things that little kids are seeing, because I asked my patients, so you're only 7, and some of these things were happening with you and another child. Did you see this from someone? Is it something you saw on TV, in a movie, in a picture, in a video? Did you walk in on your parents? Like, did something happen to you previously? Because we kind of want to we want to make sure that kid is also, we know that some of the child perpetrators are being perped on as we speak. So we're always trying to back it up to be like, okay, this kid did something horrible. What happened to that kid? And then you're kind of like moving back to try to find out how many kids are being affected in this group and trying to get everybody in for forensic interviews. And the accessibility of pornography and people having their little phones all the time. And these kids my kids, if they were little, would never have any of these smartphones, or there would be so much blockage on it, there would be no point. They might as well have a flip phone. And there are kids who know how to get online and find all of that. And I know there's just some legislation that came through recently in a couple states about trying to minimize the accessibility and age restrictions, and certain entities that they make a lot of money off of that being really upset about that. I feel like everyone should think that's the messed up thing, is trying to, well, there's always going to be ways to get around things. We do know that, but why not have it in place? Can we minimize?
Make it more difficult.
Yeah. Why do we want kids to see these kind of things? It's bad enough if stuff is happening to them, but they're seeing it and they want to act some of the things out. So it's not just kids that have been perped on, it's kids that have seen these things and they end up perpetrating. It's just, I wish I could say that there's a solution to getting rid of sexual assault, but it'll never happen. But the outcomes can be changed to where they at least have a better chance of a positive outcome. A lot of your videos that I've watched in the interviews, I don't talk about faith. I'm not going to go on and on about it now, because that's not the way I roll. I care, but I think people seeing you're different sometimes. You can plant a seed without saying things. But most of the people in your videos that have had a better outcome, even after some real crap, like Johnny, the gang member that now is like working in jail ministry and stuff like that. I think I'm safe to say, you can agree or disagree, that most of the people that have had a positive outcome have said something about God or Jesus. And I believe that, because our worth is never going to be, self-worth is the huge thing with the population that you video most of the time and interview. Your worth is never going to be determined by where you lay your head at night, how much money you have, the atrocities that have happened to you, how many friends you have, what kind of shoes you're wearing. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that all of us are worthy in God's eyes, and that every one of us is his masterpiece. And if everyone knew that, and I know people say, how could these horrible things happen to people if there's a God? Well, there's a lot of horrible people, and I don't regret anything that happened to me in my past. Some choices I've made, I absolutely have some regrets about that. But as far as the things that happened to me when I was younger, that my parents had absolutely no control over, nor did I. I don't regret it. I absolutely don't. Because while that is not the reason that I went into forensic nursing, it has nothing to do with it. It did not enter into it one bit. Mine was more because I'm methodical and detail-oriented and all those kind of things. I thought I would be fit for that job. And I knew I cared about people, because that's what was modeled by my parents. They cared. They were consistent. They were punctual, which you obviously know I am since I got here 2 hours early. But they lived out their faith every day.
Yeah. I'm the least religious person you'll ever meet, but I agree with you 100%.
That's nice to know. And I was really proud of Johnny in that video, because he was very bold in his faith. And I hadn't watched his. And when I watched some of your interviews, I was like, if I say anything, he might just edit it out. And so I was overthinking, because that's what I do best, everything that I was going to say. And when I saw that one, I felt better, because I knew you not only allowed it, you had him come back a second time, because I saw how many people watched his and how many positive comments were on his. And we all know there's a lot of haters, because my daughter's like, if this thing gets out there, don't look at the comments, because you overthink everything and you'll be like, what? She's right. Because a lot of people don't want to hear those things. Like, some people might think it's terrible I said dead baby. I know that sounds very slang and bad because it's a deceased child. But that's literally what I thought that day. I cannot take care of dead babies. I can't do this. So I'm not saying it disrespectfully. I know it doesn't sound politically correct, and I know I probably worry about that too much, because nowadays everybody gets like, oh gosh, everything comes at you now if you say one wrong thing. And I shouldn't care, but I do. Anyway, I work with a lot of law enforcement, child protective services, therapists. Not really work right beside them always, but we have somewhat kind of the same job at the end of the day. And there's a lot of us that are in healing fields that we went into because we wanted to be a part of healing people and serving people and helping. It's more actually helping than healing. And a lot of those people that I've come into contact with over the years were people who suffered at the hands of abusers as well. And I just have to think that that's also something we do for us, which sounds selfish. Again, that's never why I went into the field I'm in. But it helps us too. Anybody that knows when you feel the crappiest and the most down, that's why I paint rocks, and it sounds so stupid. I get them when I'm up in Alaska, these perfect little smooth rocks, and I paint things on them, and I hide them, and then people post them online, because there's groups all over the world that do this. And it's such a stupid little simple thing. And there's people that will post, I found this rock on the day my mom died. And it's like, that just sounds so dumb. But it means something to people. And if I can do that, and if all of the other people that I know who are in these fields can do that, And just anyone, like I said, eye contact with a homeless person walking down the street. I heard a saying, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of, the final stage of healing is when you use what happened to you to help other people. And any day that we can do that, it's a good day. It's a really good day.
What a wonderful talk. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for inviting me.
So when I was 12 years old, he performed oral sex on me for the first time, and after I had ejaculated and had an orgasm, he was proud of himself, and he asked me if I enjoyed it, and I said yes, and then he says to me, "Before I die, I'm going to fuck you." I was born and raised in Lima, Ohio, which is on 75, Northwest Ohio. I guess it's a small town, maybe 40,000 people. To me, it felt like a big city as a kid until I've kind of grown older and gone to big cities. But I was born to a mother of 3, so I was the middle child. Me and my 2 sisters were all 1 year apart, and my mom had all 3 of us by the time she was 19 or 20. She had us very early, very quick. And when I was around 2 years old, my father and my mom get into a fight, and it's a he said, she said between the 2 of them. They get into an argument, and my mom supposedly had a knife. My dad was trying to maybe defend himself and ends up stabbing her behind the ear. So he went to prison and I don't know how long he went to prison. I just never had a father growing up, and that felt, I guess, normal to me. I don't know that I realized I didn't have a father growing up. I was kind of just like, I had mom. It was like me, mom, and the sisters, and that was it. My earliest memories are being like 5 years old, being in kindergarten. I just remember being big enough to stand on a chair, reach the sink to do the dishes, to put food in the microwave, maybe cook noodles on the stove. Those are my earliest memories. I remember coming home from kindergarten. We had this, my mom would always write in a notebook like 3 paragraphs, one for each one of us, of chores to do before we could go outside and play, because she was working all the time. She was a single mother of 3 kids, so she had to work, and she would be working during the day so she could be with us at night. So we'd come home and do our chores and get everything ready and go outside and play. And then we did a bunch of dumb shit that kids always do. We were running around fighting with each other, just doing stupid things. And part of that was we ended up finding my mom's porn collection. She had a pretty big porn collection. And at 5 years old, I found like these VHS tapes that I would we'd plug them in, watch them, look at the covers, and we watch these things, and it's captivating as a child to watch porn. It's you don't know what the hell's going on, and so you're trying to figure it all out. And because of that exposure, I unfortunately would end up doing that behavior to another young girl in my community. So in this apartment complex we lived in, she was my age. I was 5, she was 5 or 6 maybe. And I was trying to have like full-blown sex with this girl. And we had our clothes on. We were in our closet. We're laying there. And I remember she had sweatpants on. And I just remember like kissing her and touching her. And she really wasn't doing anything. So I can imagine she had probably not been exposed or had no idea what the hell's going on. And then my mom like rips the door open and looks down at us, and she's like, you know, what the hell are you guys doing? And And I look up and, she's like, are you trying to have sex? And I said, no. She asked the girl said yes. And so my mom like yanks me out of the closet and beats my ass. Maybe rightfully so. Those are like my earliest memories though. I remember my mom she drank a lot. She had friends over a lot. She had boyfriends all the time. Bunch of different boyfriends. She was always drinking and smoking. There was always a bunch of friends at the house, and we were always going to different babysitters' homes too. So I had so many different babysitters growing up, and it was just normal for us, I guess, to go to a babysitter's house. And unfortunately, because of the lack of stability at home, with my mom always gone, no father in the picture, going to different babysitters' homes all the time. One of the babysitters that I lived with, or that we were staying with, we would stay with them for a week or two at a time. And they had a bunch of kids. They had like 4 or 5 boys. One of the older boys, who was a teenager, I remember being in his bunk with him at night. He took me up to the top bunk, and he would expose himself to me, and he would also look at me as well. I think he would touch me, but I for sure remember seeing him. The reason why I can remember this so well now is because I remember he looked like a grown man. I was 5 years old, and so he just looked so much different than me, which is kind of what stood out. I was kind of like puzzled or confused that, I don't know, I just didn't know what the hell was going on. And so he would touch me, and he'd make me touch him, and he was well into his teen years, and so that happened a few times. I was 5, and I remember reporting that too. I remember reporting and telling my grandparents. We would go and visit them on the weekends, and I ended up telling them. They went to my mom and went to that kid's parents and kind of tried to fix the situation. And I don't know what was done, but we kept going back to that house. In fact, my mom, there was times where she didn't have a place to live, or she wouldn't have a place for us to live. So she would have like a very small, like 1-bedroom apartment, and we would go visit her on the weekends, and we were living with these people during the week and going to school with them and being raised with them and eating dinner with them, while their teenage son had molested me multiple times. So, and even at 5 years old, I don't think I realized the impact that it had on me at that time. You're kind of just in survival mode. When you're a child going through that kind of stuff, your brain kind of goes into like this like almost reptilian mindset of you're just trying to survive. So you don't even process the emotional damage of what's happening to you in the neglect. So even without child abuse, the neglect alone damages a child, and it kind of prevents them from growing emotionally. So over the next few years, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, my mom continues to drink and smoke, dating a bunch of boyfriends. There was always like fights. So she was always getting in fights. I remember seeing a hole in the wall in one of the apartments we lived in. I remember coming home and there was a hole in the wall and there was a broken glass on the ground. And my mom had bragged about the man had like thrown a punch at her and he missed and he punched a hole in the wall and she threw a glass at him. So at this very young age, my mom was like talking about these things vividly and openly and almost like bragging to her children about what was going on. And she just wasn't in the right mindset. She shouldn't have been saying those things, and it kind of affected us. So there was a lot of boyfriends, a lot of violence and drinking, stuff like that, partying at the house. And, maybe 7, 8 years old, it starts to get worse. Her temper starts to get worse, and she's smoking weed and drinking a lot. And her temper starts to get worse to where she's basically starts to become physically abusive. She starts to close hand punch us. Instead of whooping us, it was a lot of like, she had these long nails and she had rings. She had a bunch of rings on her fingers, and she would grab us by our face, and she would like grab you by the face with her nails and slam your head into the wall. She would slam my head into the wall, and like she'd get real close to me and get real close to my face and yell at me. And I can remember, like, I have these like vivid memories of like seeing the spit between her teeth, smelling her breath as it's like hitting me in the face, and just being pushed up against the wall as she's like yelling and screaming at me about whatever we had done wrong. And she started to become more and more violent. There was times where she was drunk, driving. Her boyfriend was in the passenger seat, and she's flying down this like 25-mile-an-hour road, and she was doing probably 45 or 50, 55, and she's screaming at everybody in the car, I'm going to fucking kill everybody. I'm going to fucking kill us all. And she's like flying down this road, and me and my sisters in the back yelling and screaming, and she turns around and is telling us to shut the fuck up because we're yelling and screaming, and she was in a drunken rage, you know, and maybe high, and I don't think she was doing anything hard at this point other than just smoking weed and drinking. But these moments, we call them adverse childhood experiences, they just continue to stack up, and the more they stack up, the more life is going to be kind of against you in the long run, I guess is a way to put it. I remember coming home at 9, 10 years old and coming home from school, and this was the day that I knew that I would do something different with my life and that I wouldn't be a statistic. I remember going upstairs in this house, and I look into the living room, look off to the right in the living room, and my mom is in there, her boyfriend, there's like 6, 7 other men, and both of my sisters are in there, and at least my older sister, I know for a fact, was smoking weed with them. So all of these adults are in this living room passing a blunt to a little girl she would have been 10 years old at the oldest at that moment, smoking weed with a 10, 11-year-old girl. And at that moment, I looked over at them, and I just knew to myself I wasn't going to do anything like that. I knew that I was going to rise above it. I thought that drugs and alcohol were bad. I thought that weed was really bad. I mean, this was 20 years ago when weed was, considered like a really bad drug, I guess. So I just had this opinion that I was never going to mess with any of that shit. And I was like, I'm going to move on with my life, and I'm not ever going to do any of this. And so I knew I remember that day, I knew I'd write a book or something, because I knew that's when my life was starting to go down this path that was not common to other kids. And during that time, I ended up meeting this kid he lived around the corner from me. For the sake of the story, I'll say his name's Jacob, but I meet him. He's a little bit older than me, and I had a tendency to hang out with older kids. I had a tendency to hang out with older kids or bigger kids so that they could protect me, because I was always getting in fights. I was always getting in trouble. At night, I was always running around until 2 or 3 in the morning, throwing eggs at cars, throwing rocks at cars, breaking into cars, stealing shit, just doing a bunch of dumb shit, and I never got caught. Fortunately enough, I never got caught with anything stupid that I did as a very young boy. But I hung out with these older kids because they would always protect me. I was a very small kid, and I ended up meeting this kid Jacob. He's about 15. I was 10 years old, and I started hanging out with him. And Jacob kind of knows that my life is going south. At this point, he kind of took me in as almost like a little brother, and he was like, let me come over to his house all the time, letting me hang out, play video games, and eat with him and stuff like that, spend the night with him a lot. And he knew I was telling him about these other things that were happening. And, for example, I walked home from school one day. I wasn't supposed to walk home from school. I walked home from school, and it took us longer than we should have. Me and my cousins were kind of messing around. And when I got home, my mom wasn't mad or scared or upset that I possibly was missing. She was just, pissed off, where the fuck have you been? And I kind of walk up, and I was, caught off guard. I didn't think it was a big deal. And she takes me upstairs to give me a whooping. And this was the first time she had really hit me to a point where I knew something was wrong. And she takes me upstairs, and she bends me over the bed. I'm bent over the bed, and I'm grabbing the blankets, because when we were getting whooped, if you turn and try to protect your butt, she's just going to keep swinging. So you just hang on to the blankets until she's done, and then you're done. And it's not as bad. So I was hanging on the blankets, and she grabs this. She had this, it was like a 2x6 paddle. It was like a 2x6 with a handle carved into it. Had a bunch of holes drilled in one end of it. And she takes it, and the first time she cracks me across my ass, I processed it so quickly that this was wrong. This is bad. Because I had bounced off the bed so hard that I fell down to my knees, and she kept swinging. And she swings maybe 4, 5, 6 more times, and just hits me across my back multiple times. And I don't remember the pain of that today, but I remember everything about that room. I remember about the bed. I remember feeling the wood kind of hitting me across the back, and there was this like sense of rage and anger in the room. And as she like struck me down, I fall to the floor, and I looked up at my mom, and I don't have a father, and so I'm thinking to myself, like, looking at her, why are you doing this to me? Like, why? You're supposed to protect me and love me, and I don't have that in my life, and now you just beat the shit out of me with like no remorse. And I'm screaming and crying, and the next thing she says to me verbatim was, get the fuck out of here, go to your fucking room. And so I crawled to my room around the corner, and I laid on the floor in my room, and I was crying, and I laid there for hours. And I think mostly that was just the emotional response of I wanted my mom to come and take care of me and to love me and to protect me. And she never did. She never came up to check on me. She never said anything, and she just left me there. No remorse, no apologies, no I love yous, nothing. So I think at that point I think that's when I probably started to fantasize about suicide, because of the abuse, the drugs, and the violence in my house. But also, we didn't have a lot of money, so there was, wearing the same clothes as school, the school shoes that had holes in them. I was wet in the bed every night because I was so stressed out and scared. Oftentimes we didn't have utilities, so like we would have to heat up our bath water, and sometimes we didn't have power, or there was just like random times we just didn't have utilities for some extended amount of time, or we'd have to go to somebody's house to take a bath. And so there was just this lack of, once again, stability in the home. And I would think about jumping out of my window a lot when I was 10 years old. I didn't know how to kill myself, so I would always think about suicide, and I would thought about cutting myself. I thought about hanging myself, shooting myself, stabbing myself, or jumping out of my window. Like, I would always sit outside my window and look out there at night, and I would just think, like, if I just land just right, I'll break my neck and die at 10 years old. But I told myself, like, if I don't, it's going to hurt like hell, and I'm going to be walking around like an asshole for the rest of my life. So I was always scared. I was scared of the pain. I was scared to commit to it, so I never did, obviously. But a few weeks after that happened, I was sitting in my room and playing video games, and my older sister was in there with me. She had just come in the room. She had just gotten into a fight with my little sister, and so my older sister came in and she's venting to me, and I'm kind of listening to her. I'm playing the video game, listening to her, and I'm sitting on my bed, and off to my left there's a wall, and my sister's sitting on my bed with her back against that wall, and then right next to her is the door. And out of nowhere, my mom, boom, door kicks open. A mom looks to her right, which my sister's right there. My mom takes her hand, like hammer fist style, and just swings on my sister. Boom. Punches her in the face, hits her maybe 2 or 3 more times. I mean, just like repeatedly striking her, bouncing her. I remember seeing her head smack against the wall, and within a half a second, I had jumped on the other side of my bed, and I'm like crouched, hiding down behind my bed, looking up, and I was immediately hysterical. I was crying, just screaming, and my mom looks at me and says, "What are you fucking crying about? Stop being a fucking bitch before I give you something to cry about." And that was it. Like, she like walks out of the room, slams the door, and those are like, unfortunately, those are like the very few memories that I have of growing up. A lot of them are just these like violent, rage-induced moments of abuse and yelling and screaming. And because of the situation, I, like I said a minute ago, started hanging out with Jacob, and Jacob, I had told him about these things that were happening, so he's trying to protect me, and I'm hanging out with him and his friends are all in high school. And one day I'm over there, and this man walks in the front door, and this guy's 6'5", 380 pounds, He's massive, and he looks very pale, but you can tell he's Hispanic. He's got this long, black, slick back hair. He's got these big aviator, like wire frame glasses on. He walks in, he looks like a left tackle. Like he's massive. He doesn't look sloppy though. He looks like he could throw a hard punch. He looks very just like thick. And he walks in, and I'm kind of looking at this guy like, who the hell is this? And he says, hey, what's your name? And I'm Seth. He's like, oh, do you like video games? I'm like, yeah, I love video games. He's like, do you like pizza? Yeah, I fucking love pizza. It's like, okay. He's like, well, why don't you, or he asked me, why don't you come up to the house with me and Jacob this weekend, and we'll play video games. And so I'm like, yeah, well, let me go home and ask my mom. So I go home and ask my mom, Mom, hey, this guy, his name's Mondo. We want to go up to his house and play video games. And my mom, at this point, had known Jacob for a while. And so she said, well, as long as you're with Jacob, you can go. So I go back, and I go with Jacob, and boom, we're going up to Mondo's house. And I remember getting into his car. He had a white Honda Civic. And I get into the back seat, and there's trash everywhere. There's trash all over the floorboard. There's trash all over the seat. And I'm thinking, I was only 10 years old, so I didn't really give a shit. I was like, whatever, like, we're getting in the fucking car, like, not a big deal. Like, we're going to go fucking play video games. Like, this is going to be fucking awesome. So we get into the car, and I remember, too, there was AC, it was hot as hell. And this was the first car that I'd ever gotten into where the AC was on. And I was just like, dude, this is fucking awesome, man. I'm like, fucking AC's blasting, So we go to this chicken place in my hometown. And we get a bunch of food off the menu. I get a pop, I get fries, chicken. And once again, this is like nothing I've ever had before. Like, whenever we go to the restaurants or anything, we couldn't get shit. So I go to this restaurant, and we get all this food, and we're going up. Now we're driving like 30 minutes up to Bluffton, Ohio. And we get on 75, and we're listening to AC/DC, Metallica, and I'm in the back seat, and I'm just looking at these two in the front seat. I've got Jacob, who's like basically like an older brother to me now, and Mondo, my new friend, who's got a fucking car, and he can drive and buy me shit. I'm like, dude, like, this is fucking awesome. Like, man, like, my life is finally gonna turn around. I was like so excited to have these good friends, and where I could cuss, I could do whatever the hell I wanted. It was awesome. And so we get to his house, we pull up, and it's a studio apartment. So it's just one building. I walk in the front door, and the first thing I notice is it's dark and it's cold. Dark and very cold. And there's just like a shit ton of trash piled up right there in front of the door. Just like his car, like there was like trash bags and just like random shit just piled up right in the front door. And I turn to my right, and I see an entertainment center, 2 or 3 TVs, and a few game systems, like Xboxes, PlayStations. I look to the back right corner, there's 2 desktop computers. In the middle of the room, there's a big round table with like Dungeons and Dragons stuff on there. And in the back left corner, there's this black curtain that's hanging from the ceiling, and it kind of it blocks off the corner. That's where his bed was. And there's a couch and chair and stuff in front of the TVs. And my first thought immediately was, all right, this is fucking sick, because there's multiple TVs, there's multiple game systems, like we don't have to take turns. I'm like, dude, this is fucking awesome. And in the back right corner, on the other side of the desktop computers, there's like a kitchenette. So there's like, you got your stove and your fridge, and there's a little bathroom in there as well. It's just like a typical studio apartment. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. I go back there, go to the bathroom, check the fridge. It's loaded up with like pop and whatever, energy drinks. And so we started playing video games, and it was just fucking awesome, man. It's like going to your friend's house, but every time you go to your friend's house as a kid, they have parents, and so they have fucking rules. And you can't eat the fucking potato chips, you can't eat the snacks, you can't drink the pop, you can't do this. And there was like no fucking rules. I'm like, dude, this is fucking awesome, man. So we're playing video games, boom, having a great fucking time. That night, I slept. I would either sleep on the couch, or he had this like rollout mat that was behind the couch, and I would sleep on that. And I remember seeing Jacob go back and get in his bed with him. I remember like him going back to his bedroom, and I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, if me and another boy were having a sleepover, we sleep in the same bed too. Like it never dawned on me that anything might have been happening. So whatever, wake up, Sunday comes around, we start watching football. You know, we're all like Buckeye and Browns and Packers fans, and so we're watching football. And on Sundays, you know, we'd watch football, get tacos, and then he would take us home. And so he takes us home, and when we're going home, he asks, you know, like, well, hey, when do you want to come back? And I was like, dude, I'll fucking come back like next weekend. Like, let's do this again. So it basically becomes a ritual or routine that I would go to his house every single weekend from this point forward. If there's 52 weekends in a year, I was at his house 45 to 50 of them every fucking weekend. And within about a month or two, I start to disclose to Mondo that, you know, my mom is real mean. My mom is abusive, and I start telling him about my personal life a little bit more in more detail. And I tell him my mom is mean, and she's an alcoholic, and she smokes a lot, and she's abusive. And I was also a really smart kid. I was a perfect student. I was a straight A student in school. So telling him all of these things, I was telling him about the bullies that I had at school, the issues that I had at school. And everything that I told him, he would reiterate to me about his own life. He would tell me, oh, well, you know, my mom was real mean when I was growing up too. And I also had two sisters, and my mom loved my sisters, but she didn't like me. She would abuse me and beat me, and, you know, he didn't have a father in his life. I didn't have a father. He loved video games. I love video games. He loved football. I love football. We loved the same things, and he was the only person in my entire life at this point that I could talk to that could relate to me 100%. And so we just started bonding and became very close, and, you know, within a month or two. And I was going up to his house alone now. If Jacob couldn't go, I would just go by myself. And I don't remember if my mom was asking or if I just started lying or what. I just was going to his house regardless every weekend. And I would end up meeting his mom, end up meeting his sisters. I would end up going to his Thanksgivings, 4th of July's, Christmases, met his whole family. And so this man who's in his 30s is showing up to holidays, family holidays, with this little boy who's 10 years old, 11 years old. And at the time, I had real long hair. I had real long brown hair down to my shoulders. And truthfully, I did look like a little girl. And when I first met his mom actually told me I was too pretty to be a boy. And, you know, we kind of laughed about it and laughed it off. And I keep hanging out with him. And, you know, maybe 3 or 4 months in, I'm up at his house, and Jacob's actually with us this weekend. And on a Sunday, Jacob goes to get tacos before we go home, and we're watching football. And his apartment was so cold that I was always cold in there. So one day, you know, prior to this moment, Mondo had said, well, if you're cold, why don't you sit in my lap with me? And he's, you know, like I said, he's this big ass guy. So I get in his lap, I'm sitting on his left knee, and I'm under the blanket with him. And it was so nice. It was so warm. He was so big. He was like a big pillow, like a big teddy bear. And he cared about me, and he loved me. I could feel it, you know. When you're a little boy, like, your father's love and affection is something that is just so special. And I never had that. And so, like, when I was, like, snuggled up with him, I was like, man, like, this is, like, really, like, I just love this. Like, this is so comforting, and I'm safe. I can relax. And so I'm laying there on his chest, and he's got the blanket over us, and his left hand's on my left hip, and he had these massive hands, like, just, his hands were so big, and his knuckles were huge, and they were calloused. They were so calloused, he would take his knuckles and rub them together, and it sounded like if you were taking rocks and rubbing 2 rocks together. He would always do that with his knuckles. And he had these long nails, and I remember even, like, his palms were calloused, and he had his left hand on my left hip. And, you know, we're kind of watching football, and his hand drops off my hip and it hits my butt. And he said, I'm sorry. And I was like, it's not a big deal. Like, not a big deal. You just bumped my butt, not a big deal. You know, I'm thinking to myself, like, if you and me bump each other in the hallway, not a big deal. And so he brings his hand back up and grabs my butt, and he says, so this is okay. And at that moment, I knew that something wasn't right. Like, I knew what was happening. and I froze, which basically gives them consent, because if I did not fight it off right away, he knows that he got me. So he's holding me by just on my butt, and we hear the gravel outside. And so Jacob had just gotten back from the tacos, and so we hear the gravel, and he moves his hand real quick. And so at that point, I had acknowledged, like, okay, he knows that this was wrong, and that what he's doing to me is wrong. I know it's wrong, and I just sit there in silence. And Jacob comes in, and we eat our tacos, and we go home. And I didn't think anything of it after that. I was just kind of like, there's, not a big deal. I'm sure it wasn't anything. So keep going back to his house, And every weekend I would go there from this point forward, he was just kind of rounding the bases, basically. And I would go up, and I would immediately sit in his lap at this point. I'd go up there, climb in his lap, and sit there, and he'd put his hand on me, and then he would start to work his hand into my shorts. And it went from, he would put his thumb into my waistband. He'd put his thumb in my waistband so he could just hang his hand there. And then he'd work his index finger in there. And then he would slowly, get 3 fingers into my waistband. And then he would have his whole hand in my waistband. And to this day, I can remember the callousy, feeling of his skin rubbing against my hip and my leg. And his nails just, touching your skin. All these senses, these sensory feelings. And he slowly starts to work his hand into my pants to where he's just got his hand on my butt, on my bare skin, on my butt. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just, you don't know what to do. You're terrified, and you're getting all of these other things like video games, pizza, pop, and entertainment and attention. So you don't do anything. You just sit there. And so it progressively gets worse and worse every weekend, and during this time, after knowing him for about 3 or 4 months, my mom had a new boyfriend. So not only was this happening on the weekends, but during the week, we had moved into a new home during the winter in Ohio, and I remember getting to this house, and we didn't have utilities on the house yet. We couldn't afford it, so we're moving in, and there's no power. We were actually running a extension cord from our basement to the neighbor's basement. We were stealing their power, and we had it hooked up in our house to try to get some space heaters going. So we're walking around the house trying to move in, and it was so cold that you could see your breath in the house. And so I remember going upstairs, walking upstairs. There's this hardwood stairs. It's all rickety and cracking and popping. And I go to turn into my bedroom. My bedroom's right at the top of the stairs, and the hardwoods are completely buckled and ripped apart. They're buckled and cracked and split, and they do that when they're exposed to weather. Hardwoods will. And so I look up, and there's this hole in my ceiling. It's maybe 3-4 feet wide and 2-3 feet deep, and it's exposed attic straight above. So I could see straight into the attic above, and I'm thinking to myself, this is my room, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I was about 10 years old, at this point. And so I'm thinking and my room smelled like piss and shit. Apparently the people that had lived there before had several dogs just locked up in that room. And so I've got this shithole of a room that I'm living in. I slept on a thin little mattress. It was 3-4 inches thick on the floor. Had a thin little blanket, wet the bed every night. It was freezing cold. And that was my sanctuary. That was the place I could go to get away from the rest of my house if I needed to. My sister slept in the hall slept in a bedroom down the hallway, and their room was relatively normal. My mom slept downstairs in the living room, and this was the point where I started to question my mom's decision making, because she had put me up in this room, and she was down in the living room where it was nice and warm sleeping, and she had no issues with me sleeping up in my room where I was exposed to the elements and the weather and stuff. So that's when I started to question what the fuck is going on. And I really was going down that deep suicidal ideation kind of thing, thinking about it all day every day, and it was getting really bad. Because we were in this new house and she's with this new boyfriend, he started selling her on pipe dreams. He gets her addicted to crack and cocaine. And this guy was he's the head of a church. He's a pastor or whoever the fuck gets in front of the church and speaks, whatever that title is. He was that guy, and he gets my mom addicted to crack and cocaine. And I remember going to the church, and my mom was like infatuated with this guy because he was a man of God, and all these people in the fucking crowd yelling and screaming, speaking tongues, and I had never seen that shit before. So I was like, what the fuck is going on? And me and my sisters are like, what the hell is going on? And we go back home, and we start to see more drugs coming into the house. We start to see like 10, 15, 20 people a day would come in, and they would go to the bathroom in the back of the house. There was this tiny little bathroom, and they'd get high. They'd be back there for hours, 8, 9, 10 hours, and they'd just get high all day. At night, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, they would be sitting on my couch or the chair. And I remember just like walking in and seeing them. And this is the first time I had been exposed to, I guess, hard drugs. But they would sit there and like, I remember they would like sit back, and they would have their hands on their legs, and they would just like kind of like shake. They were just like convulsing almost, or their heads would be like tilted back, and they would just be like a fucking zombie. And I was like, I remember being there like 10 years old, like looking at them like, what the fuck is going on? And I was just like staring at these guys like, Jesus Christ. And, that I had a pregnant aunt at the time. She was very visibly pregnant, and she was one of those people that I had seen getting high. And, one day we had a maintenance guy show up at the house, and I opened the front door, and he needed to go in the basement, so I go check on the basement. I go open the door. My mom was down there, and I almost always knocked whenever I went into the bathroom, because for two reasons, kind of to protect her, but also to protect me. Like, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know that it was actually happening, and I also wanted to give my mom an opportunity to protect herself, from like her own kids seeing her do these things. And so this day, though, I didn't think to knock, and I would just open the door, and I remember seeing like a bottle, like a water bottle, and some like clear smoke, and a couple people down there. And when I opened the door, they kind of jumped and turned, almost like that innocent or the guilty like conscience kind of thing. And she's like, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, somebody here." And so I was really starting to like confirm with myself that she was indeed doing hard drugs. And so Monday through Friday, like, this was the life I was living. Going home, sleeping in that room, and seeing all the drugs and the addicts coming in and out of my house. My mom was selling our food stamps for drugs, so we really didn't have a lot of food. We were eating like egg noodles and butter for a lot of meals. I remember, it was just bad. We didn't have a lot of money, a lot of food, a lot of clothes. And my only escape, once again, was going back to Mondo's house. So every weekend, Friday night, he'd come pick me up. I'd go up there Friday night, Saturday night, come home Sunday. And, things at Mondo's house get worse. It went from going up there, and probably 90% of it was like video games and fun, and 10% of it was like him kind of touching me, to slowly the ratio just kind of flipped. It was like 80-20, and then 70-30, and then it's like half and half. And then within a year, it had gotten to the point where I would go to his house, and as soon as we got there, he would go back and lay in his bed, and he would talk about how depressed he was and how he wanted to kill himself, and how if I didn't go back there with him, or if I wasn't seeing him, or if I wasn't visiting him, he was going to kill himself. And so he would lay back there, and he would punch the wall behind his bed, and he would just punch it with these big ass hands. And I'd be out there playing video games, and I would hear like the boom, boom, boom. And like the first few times it happened, I'm like, what the hell's going on? And so I go back there and check on him, like, hey, like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And, he would just say, I'm just so angry, or I'm so depressed, or, whatever it was to get my attention. And after a few times of that happening, because he would say that, and then I would get in bed with him. He would basically, he wanted me to love him and get in bed with him. So I would get into bed with him, and then, he would be touching me, and he would put his hands in my shorts, and he would, he's just trying to make progress sexually. And so after a few times of that happening, when I was out there playing video games, and I would hear that banging on the wall, it was almost like being called to hell, or like the dinner bell ringing. It was just like, I knew my time was coming. Like, I knew, like, that's what that was. And so I would be playing, when I heard that, my stomach would just drop, and I'm just thinking, like, you gotta like go pay your dues. You gotta go like pay the taxes or whatever. Like, you gotta go do the deed. and he wouldn't stop until I did. So he wouldn't stop until I did it. And so at some point it became easier for me to just feed the beast than to hold them off and try to fend them off. And 11 years old, 12 years old, he starts to touch me more. He starts to touch my penis more. He's grabbing me, by my penis, and I'm getting aroused. My body does the natural thing, and I get aroused. And I remember the first times, like he had very rough hands, like I said, and he was just touching me and it hurt. And so I remember the first times of him spitting into his hand and going down on my 11-year-old body, and he's touching me and like masturbating me and laying there, and just like his room was dark as hell, and there was no clock back there, so there was like no frame of reference for time. I would just be back there for what seemed like hours and hours and hours, and it kind of felt like it was just like a black bed. It just kind of felt like you're lost at sea and you're just trying to stay above water, and these waves just keep coming and coming, and you're just like wondering like, when's this going to end? And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And he goes down, and I was like 12 years old the first time he performs oral sex on me. I remember him kind of working, he's like laying his head on my chest, and he starts to work down, and I'm laying there, and I'm kind of just like, I don't know what's going on. And then he goes down and he starts to perform oral sex on me, and I remember laying there looking down, and this whole thing's happening, and I'm going through this like range of emotions, and I end up having my first orgasm. And when I was done, or I had an orgasm, he looks up at me like proud, and he looks up at me and he says, "Did you enjoy that?" And what am I going to say? Like, I just had an orgasm, so yes. And he was real proud of that. And over the course of time, he convinces me or manipulates me. Well, I don't know the right word for it, but he gets me to perform oral sex on him. And at first it was just like my hand. It was just using my hand, and I remember the first time, like reaching down. He's like, he would grab my hand and pull my hand over, and he'd put it, down on his waistband, and then he would I wouldn't move. Like I did not like partake in any of this. I did not enjoy it. It just made my skin crawl. But he would take my hand and he would just kind of push it down a little bit further, and I would just freeze. I just was frozen. I just didn't want to move. And I remember he pushes my hand down like onto his penis over his underwear, and it was soaked. Like his underwear was soaked, and I was like thinking to myself, like, oh my god. Like I pulled my hand back because it was wet, and I'm like, this guy's like pissing himself. Come to find out, he was so stimulated, so aroused by my 10, 11, 12-year-old body that he was almost ejaculating before I was even touching him. And that's what that was. And eventually, he gets me to put my hand in his underwear, and then I'm touching his penis, and I'm like masturbating him, and then he pushes my head down, and he's kind of like inching my body, and I'm just like, it's like being drug across like nails on a chalkboard. It's just like this like visceral feeling, and I'm getting pushed down there. And I remember being down there and looking at him and doing the deed and performing the act, and he's pushing on my head, and he ejaculates, and it actually, the first time it shot up and it hit me in the face and it hit me in the eye, and I like jerked my head back, and I'm like, God, I'm just thinking to myself, like, this is fucking disgusting. And he hands me a towel, but the first thing he does is he looks at me and he laughs at me and he says, "Oh, that was crucial." And I've got his ejaculate on my face, and he says, "That was crucial." And I clean myself up, and we laughed about it. You know, he laughed and I had to laugh. I don't know what else to do, so I laugh. And from that point forward, whenever something would happen in public or something crazy would happen, he would just tell me like, oh, that's crucial. You know, that's crucial. And he would like, that was like his fucking jab at me anytime we were ever doing anything. And so we had known each other for about 2 years at this point, and we had friends too. We had like other adult groups, friends that we'd hang out with and play video games with and watch football with. And whenever we were over there with those people, he would actually tell these other adults that, hey, you know, we got to go. Seth's going to blow me tonight, or I'm going to go back and fuck Seth tonight. And everybody would just laugh it off. And I was like, ha ha ha, you know, I'm laughing it off too. But I knew like what was actually coming. And he was just hiding in plain sight. Like, and Mondo was like funny. He was charismatic. He was very smart, strategic, calculated. He actually ran a haunted house in his hometown of Bluffton, Ohio, out of his mom's front porch, where like thousands of kids would come every year, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 kids, and he was always the one giving them candy at the end of the house, you know. And I participated in that haunted house like several times, scaring kids. And so he was like, he was good at what he was doing. He knew, you know, he was like the typical guy. Just everybody loved him. He was in the community. And he was a good friend. He was funny, all of the things. And then behind closed doors, he's doing this horrendous things to me. You know, and so he would, I kept going back to his house. And I remember showing up one time and he had bought me a thong, like a woman's like panties or thong or whatever. It was leopard print. And I remember him making me wear it. And I would like parade around his apartment in this thong. And that was like one of the more, for some reason, that just like really disgusts me. I don't know why that thing in particular just bothers me so much, but it does. It's just really weird. And, you know, the oral sex starts to become almost every weekend, where, like I said, I'd go back to his bed and then he would either perform it on me or I would do it to him. You know, there was a time where I was performing on him and I kind of like gag and I'm like, he's like, hey, what's, you know, are you okay? He's like checking on me and I said, you know, yeah, I'm fine. And it wasn't anything other than the fact that he just smelled like shit. He was 380 pounds. He just stunk. And so when I went to do the perform oral sex on him, I just couldn't, like, I was like, it was just disgusting. And you know, so it was really bad. And this starts to happen every weekend. And then he wants to use his fingers on me. There's this jar of Vaseline that was next to his bed. And so he's always trying to use his fingers on me, penetrate me with his fingers. And I just was so hesitant. I just did not want to do that, and it hurt. And one time he's trying it, and he says, you know, well, what's wrong? And I said, well, that hurts. And he said, what do you mean? I said, he's got these long nails. I said, I can feel your nails. It hurts really bad. So the next weekend I went back, you know, we go back to his bed, and his nail was gone. And so that's like the kind of gentleman that he was, right? To get rid of his nails so that he could use them on this little boy, use his fingers on this little boy. And so, yeah, he started to, and he starts to basically rape and penetrate me with his fingers. And that starts to become a frequent thing where, like, that's what he does. Every time I hang out with him now, we go back to the bed, and I can remember, once again, his massive hands. I can remember he would do it all with one hand. He would spread my butt and then do the act. And it was fucking miserable. And I would just fucking cry inside. I wouldn't actually cry. It was just like this like internal, like painful moment of just disgust. And, you know, dealing with that Friday, Saturday, every weekend, once again, going home. And then when I was about 12 years old, my mom, I was like 12 and a half or so. And I was home on a Sunday or it might have been during the summer, can't really remember. But I just remember my sisters were at my neighbor's house, and that was really odd. They were never over there. And so I walk in, and I'm like, hey, you know what's going on? And I walk in, and they're watching a TV show called Intervention. So that was a show about people that are addicted to drugs, and they do a surprise intervention to try and rescue them. And so I walk in, and I see them watching the show, and we're all watching it. This is the first time I'd seen it. And I was like, oh, shit. You know, and at the end of the episode, they say, if you know anybody reach out to us and we can see if we can help you. And so I'm like, me and my sisters like look at each other and we're like, hey, like we know somebody, you know, like Mom, let's get Mom on the fucking show and see if they'll fucking help her. And no shit, that day we walk outside. It must have been like around noon, 1, 2 o'clock, because the sun was out. Walk outside and there's a fire in the front yard. And immediately, me and my 2 sisters are hysterical. Next thing I see is my mom's boyfriend walk out of the front door. He's got a wife beater on. He's got blood all over his shirt. My mom walks out of the house. She's yelling and screaming and storming around. Her leg from like her knee down is like green and veiny. She had a broken ankle. Or broken foot she was walking around on, and it was all infected, and so she was just like storming around in a rage, and cop car pulls up and I'm just broken apart. I was 12 years old and I'm screaming and crying, and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I know my mom's about to be taken away. And so she goes, the cops grab her, put her in the back of the car, and I'm standing in the middle of the street, and I just remember it was so hot that day.
Good job sorting out the lumber situation. Of course, logs from afar won't do the local economy any favors in the long run, but we can put this place together now. Which reminds me, we need more than just lumber for that. The map shows a machine yard not far from your position, and it could help us get the rest of what we need. Could you kindly go and check if it's still there? Same goes for the village nearby while you're at it.
And I was sweating profusely, but I was also crying hard, and I was just like freezing cold. And I'm looking at my mom in the back of this police car out of nowhere, and she's about to be taken away from me. And I knew that my life was about to change dramatically. Like I just didn't know what the fuck was going on. And so she's like talking to me through the window, and she's telling me she loves me and she's going to be back and she's going to come and get me back and all of these things. And I can almost like, during that moment, it was like there was a third person camera behind me watching this whole thing happen. And I was like terrified. I was scared and screaming and crying, and the cop takes her away. And we go back in the house, and there's a cop in there, and he kind of says, you know, what are we going to do with the kids? And out of nowhere, like my dad shows up in the picture, and we end up going to my dad's house. I go to my dad's house, and we're living there, and we really have no idea what happened to my mom. But anyways, we get to my dad's house, and we get enrolled into another school, and I'm at this new school getting in a bunch of trouble because of all the shit that I was going through at the time. And I was, I went to alternative school for a couple weeks. I got a couple, like, suspended a few times, and I was told that if I got in trouble again, I was going to go to juvie. So I told my dad, I was like, I got to leave. I can't stay here. I got to go back to the city where I'm used to these other people. So I leave my dad's house. I go to my cousin's back in the city where I was from, Lima. And my aunt is about to have a baby. And so she says, well, we're about to have a baby. Like, you can't live with us. You need to find somewhere else to go. So I call up some other random people, and I'm like, hey, can I come live with you? I need some place to live. And so I'm living with these other random people. And I was living there for a month or two, and then I was scared and alone and taking care of myself. I had no parents or no friends. My sisters weren't with me anymore. I was just like running around by myself at 12 years old trying to survive and live. And so I called these other people to ask them if I could live with them, because my friend that I had met earlier and a few years earlier, Jacob, he was living with these people. And so I called Jacob and that family and I said, hey, like, can I come and live with you guys too? And they were like a middle class family. It was like a mom and a dad and a couple kids, and they're like a normal middle class family. And so they said yes without hesitation. So I move in with them, and I thought like life was finally, once again, I'm like, okay, life is kind of turning around now. Like I have a family and these people are taking care of me and this feels good. And I'm with Jacob and Jacob's protecting me. And this was the first time in a couple years that I had gone probably 2 or 3 weeks without going to Mondo's house. And on a Saturday, I was talking on the phone with Mondo, and he says, you know, well, why aren't you coming to my house anymore? And I told him, I said, well, I don't need you. I have a family now. Like I have a mom and a dad and brothers and sisters. I have a reason to be home. Like I don't need to escape anymore. And when I said that, he, you know, went into this very like pathetic, depressed state and discussion about like, what am I supposed to do without you? Like, what do you mean you don't need me? You know, if you don't come here, like I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to, you know, end my life, and you're the only thing that matters to me. And I'm 12 years old. I'm like talking to this guy on the fucking phone. I'm like, dude, like what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Like I'm fucking a little fucking kid, bro. Like leave me alone. Like I was fed up with what was going on at this point, you know? And, but I didn't say any of that. I said, okay. And I said, okay, I'll come up there next week and I'm sorry. And I apologize. And the psychological torture that people have on others and the power, the manipulation that they have is incredible. And so I'd go back to his house the next weekend and keep going. And once again, the molestation and the abuse continues. While I was living with these people, I get a phone call one day, and I didn't get phone calls, so it was kind of weird. And I answer the phone, and it's my mom. And I hadn't talked to my mom in 4 or 5 months, and I have no idea where she's at. Didn't know if she was out of jail or what. Apparently she was out of jail, and she says, you know, where are you at? I said, well, I'm living with these people. She said, well, I'm going to come and get you. And I pause for a minute, and I'm on the phone, and I say, I don't want to live with you anymore. Like, I don't want to go back and live with you. I don't want to do this. And she, instead of loving and understanding or trying to explain herself, she says, fuck you. You're my fucking son. I'm going to fucking come and get you. You're my fucking responsibility. Like, don't tell me that fucking bullshit. And I just go into a deep, like, sob and crying and just broken apart, because I want nothing more than to live with my mom and to have a mom and a dad and to have this like normal life. And I miss my sisters. I want nothing more than that at this point in my life. And I couldn't have it because the way my mom was acting. And I, fortunately enough, was brave enough to address the situation that way. And so that family, they offered to adopt me, and I said yes. I said, please, yes, I want you to adopt me. And they weren't related to me in any form or fashion, so somehow my grandparents were contacted, and my grandparents show up, and they take me in. And when I get to my grandparents' house, my sisters were already there, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, you know, I get to my grandparents, and my grandparents are well off. They're, you know, they own a home, and grandpa worked for Ford, and my grandma ran her own business. And so I knew my grandparents. I'd known them, you know, my whole life. And so I was excited. I get to their house, and like we got the whole finished basement to ourselves, a backyard pool, like all the shit. Nice cars, clothes, food on the fucking table. Could eat food whenever the fuck I wanted. So I was like, dude, like, fuck yeah. I was like, yes. You know, I get there, and I'm like, see my sisters, and I'm like, dude, like, this is awesome. Like, we finally made it out, you know, like, we're going to be okay now. And within a couple weeks, my mom had been talking to my sisters and convinced them to go back and live with her. So she was able to take my sisters out of this house, out of this stability, take them back and live in the city in a house that had no utilities in this fucking little shithole town. And I stayed with my grandparents, and I told them, you know, like, I want you to adopt me. And so they start the adoption process, and after a couple weeks of being there, I'm like, hey, you know, I want to go hang out with my friend Mondo. And my grandma's like, well, who's Mondo? Well, he's this guy. And they're like, well, how old is he? He's like 36. And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, no, like, he's not like that. He's not weird. He's not, you know, he's not crazy. And I tell her, Jacob knows him. Like trust me, like Jacob knows him. He's cool. And so they're cautious because they know I'd been molested at 5, And so I'm like, no, he's not weird. And so they're like, well, we want to meet him. So I tell Mondo, I'm like, hey, they want to meet you before I can go to your house. And so he shows up. He gets out of the car like it's fucking prom night. I think he took a shower that day. And he gets out and he's got, his best sweatpants on, his best plain red, like 5XL t-shirt. Walks up to the front door, rings the doorbell. Hey, I'm Mondo. Walks in. Big fucking guy, teddy bear. Everybody loves him. Cracks some jokes, smiles, laughs. And my grandparents love him, And he's like, yeah, I know Seth's got a hard time. And he's come from some hard times. And I grew up like that too. And, we've just been friends for a few years now. And we hang out, we play video games, and that's it. So he's back in the saddle. I go back to his house. And from this point forward, from like about 12 and a half, 13 years old forward, he starts to actually attend my family events at this point. He had never met my mom, never met my dad, but when I was with my grandparents, he starts to come to my birthday parties, my Christmases, my Thanksgivings, and now Seth is the friend with this old man. It's kind of like this like real twisted fucking situation. So he's showing up to my house, and my grandparents love him, and they're like, they would buy him random shit or like gift cards or like whatever the fuck, he was like part of the family now. And I remember the adoption paperwork goes through around my 13th birthday because they had a surprise birthday party for me, and I'd never had that before. And I remember getting off the bus and seeing a bunch of people in the driveway, and Mondo was there. All my friends and family are there, and around that time, I'm up at Mondo's house. I think I was 13, and he finally convinced me to let him rape me for the first time. And that was a pretty horrific moment. I remember going back to the bed. He was pounding on the wall. I go back there, open the curtain. I know it's coming. I know it's going to happen. We're going to do something, and he, this time though, he was sitting up, he was never sitting up. He was always laying down. So he's sitting up there at the end of the bed, and I walk in, and he kind of grabs me, and he kind of pulls me towards him, and I'm kind of standing between his legs, and he's got his hands on me, and he pulls my shorts down, and he's grabbing me by my butt, and I'm kind of like confused once again because he's never sitting on the end of the bed. It's usually he's laying down, and so he stands up and he kind of moves me over, and he kind of gets behind me and he pushes me into the bed, and my knees hit the mattress, right there at my kneecaps, and so he kind of nudges me, and I go to my knees, and as soon as that happens, I'm like, motherfucker, like, this is it, like, this is just going to happen. And so I go to my knees, and I'm on my hands and knees on the end of his bed, and I feel his legs kind of go towards my feet, and he's like kind of opening up my legs. He grabs the Vaseline that's right next to the bed, and the Vaseline had all these like deep scoops in them, like these, like, you could see where he had scooped his fingers through so many times to use the Vaseline on me. So I kind of like look over, and I see him grab the jar, and I feel his finger kind of swipe down my butt, and he basically lubes me up, and feel his massive hands grab me by my hips, and he starts to like kind of push into me, and I'm just sitting there like shaking and just stiff as a board and scared, and he starts to rape me, and he's going through the process. He's raping me. I can feel like his grip on my hips, and then I can feel him tense up, and then I hear like a sigh of relief from him. And it almost felt like the tension was just gone. Like there was like no more tension in the air. It was just like he like took a big breath. He backs away from me. I can feel the Vaseline basically like dripping from me, like it's warm and dripping, and I'm just standing there, and he takes a towel and wipes me up. He cleans me up with this towel. I stand up and I go to the bathroom and I sit on his toilet, and I'm sitting on the toilet getting everything out of my body that he had just done to me. And I was sitting there, 13 years old, just been raped, and thinking to myself, like, why did my fucking life have to be like this? Like, why don't I have a mom and a dad? I'm getting bullied at school. I don't have any friends. I was scared I had AIDS or HIV. I was scared I had some sort of disease. I couldn't tell anybody this at this point because now people are going to think I'm gay. They're going to think I'm having sex with this man. They're going to think all these like weird fucking things about me. So I couldn't tell anybody anything. I was just fucking terrified. And I got up and I took a shower, and that was the first time I'd ever taken a shower at his house. And I walk out of the bathroom and I put a smile on and I keep playing the fucking game. And that goes on for another about 2.5 years. And I was up at his house one weekend with a younger friend of mine. This kid was maybe 2 or 3 years younger than me, and I was playing video games, and this was like a Friday night, I think, or Saturday night, and my friend was having a bad day. And Mondo makes a comment towards him and says, he's like, well, if you're having a bad day, I could take you back there and blow you. And he says it right in front of me, and we all laugh it off. And I know what he's doing, though. Like, I know the game he's playing because this is the shit that he would say to me. So I'm like, what the fuck? And I actually thought to myself, like, the audacity. Like, you think I don't know what you're about to do to him, because you did it to me, And so kind of threw me off that he said that right in front of me. Because I always thought that I was like the only one, there's no way this is happening to anybody else. And so when he made that comment, I was like, oh shit. So that night I messaged, when that happens, Mondo goes back to his bed. My younger friend goes back there with him. And that was the first time I'd ever seen we'd hung out with other kids before, but that was the first time I'd ever seen another kid go back in that bed with him, other than Jacob, when we first started hanging out. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, I can't.
The ground looks like an overripe melon that someone dropped. I'm sure it won't be a problem for you, so I won't bother you with any advice. Especially since I'm drawing a blank now anyway.
Like this happened. So I'm playing the video game online, and Jacob was actually online. He's up at college at this point. He's like 21, 22 years old. And I messaged him and I said, hey man, I need you to come over to my house tomorrow. So Jacob says, got it. That's all he says. He says, okay, got it. And as I said that, it was kind of weird. Mondo like suddenly comes out of the bedroom and he walks over to the video game that I'm playing on the computer, and he says, well, who are you playing with? Which wasn't uncommon. That wasn't like a weird question to ask for him to say who you playing with. And I said, oh, like nobody. I didn't, nobody. Because when Mondo came out, I scrolled up in the chat on the game to try to hide the chat between me and Jacob, because I knew that if he saw that I had said something to Jacob, I knew that he would know something was up, because he's fucking smart. Like, these people are really, really smart, and they would suspect something. So I tried to hide it, and I think he saw it, because the whole like mood shifted that night. The whole mood was like real off. He was like real quiet and mad, and so I think he saw it, and I truthfully, I thought he was going to murder us. I was like, the whole night, I was just like watching the door, watching him, and I was trying to just make sure that if I needed to, I could escape if he started acting kind of weird. Like, I was so close to running out of his apartment that night and just running to the police department or running to the next person that I could find. I just couldn't leave my friend, and I was scared he's going to murder me. So, we go through the rest of that night. And it was either that night or the next. He ends up raping me that weekend again. And, over the last like 3 years or so, since the first time he had done it, I don't know, he raped me several times. I don't really remember how many, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 times. And so Sunday rolls around, and Mondo takes us home. He drops me off first, and he goes and drops off my other friend in the city. And when he drops me off, Jacob shows up like an hour later, and we're walking around the house, and me and Jacob are talking, and we go back to my room, and my grandparents are like, they're having a great day, they're laughing and joking, don't think anything of it. And we go back to my room, Jacob and I'm pacing in my room, I'm walking back and forth, and I'm just like, hey man, like I gotta tell you something, and I don't know what to tell you, or I don't know how to say this, and I've been wanting to say this for a long time, but I'm just fucking scared. Like I'm scared that nobody's gonna believe me, or I'm scared that like I don't want you to be upset with me. And I couldn't say the words. I could not physically fucking say it. I just kept saying, I gotta tell you something, I gotta tell you something, I gotta tell you something. And Jacob breaks the silence and he says, Mondo touched you, didn't he? And when he said that, I turned and looked at him, and I just fall to the floor, and I just started crying. And I kind of felt the same emotions and pain that I did the day that my mom was taken away from me, and the night that I was raped, and like all of these emotions of the last 16 years have kind of just like hit me in the fucking stomach. And I fall to the floor, and I'm crying, and I'm screaming, and I can't control myself, I can't breathe, and I'm just like, just bawling my eyes out. And after maybe 2 or 3 minutes, the next thing he says is, well, he did it to me too. And I turn and look at him, and my heart is so broken, no longer really for myself, but I just couldn't believe that it had happened to him, because Jacob was like my older brother. Like if you've got a father or a big brother in your life, like that shit didn't happen to them. Like there's no way in hell that would have happened to your brother or your father or this man. Whoever you admire, the most manly guy, it wouldn't have happened to him. And he said that, and that fucking hurt. And I felt so fucking bad. And so I get up, and we kind of hug it out for a minute, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, fuck this guy. I said, we got to fucking report him. Like, I'm not letting him get away with this shit, because he's about to do it to my younger friend, who Jacob also knew this kid. And so I was like, I'm not letting him get away with it. And so he says, okay, well, he's like, let's go tell, grandma and grandpa. So we go outside, or we go out to the other room, and we sit down, and I can't say it again. I can't say the words, and I'm crying, and my face is flushed, and my grandma's like, what the fuck's going on? She's like kind of like puzzled, and Jacob says, it's Mondo. And when he says that, my grandma, I can hear her say, like my baby, and she starts crying, and she's just the gasp and like the trembling voice that she had of just like my baby. And I get up, and I go give her a hug, and I felt fucking horrible, and I just started apologizing. I knew it wasn't my fault, but I felt so fucking bad for letting this man into our house and defending him and bringing him in. He was part of the family and all of these things. And so, I apologize, and my grandparents are pissed off, and my grandpa is more mad than he is, I think, emotional or sad about it. And we call the cops, and they tell us to go down to the police station, and we get down there, and I meet this cop, Chad Couples, from Bluffton, Ohio. He walks in, and I have to tell this cop all these horrible details that just happened to me over the last few years. And he tells me, the more you tell me now, the better off we are to get this guy. And so I said, okay. So I said, let's do it. So I start pouring all these fucking horrible details out. And part of people ask a lot, like, why didn't you report? Why didn't you say something? Why did it take you 6 years? Why'd you keep going back? And a lot of the shame that is attached is by not reporting him. I would never have to admit that these things ever happened to me. And I would never have to admit that I ever was a part of that. I'd never have to admit that I did these things with another man. I'd never have to admit any of this shit if I don't fucking report him, right? So by not reporting him, I'm protecting him out of the manipulative situation, relationship that we had, but I'm also protecting myself and my own dignity. Like, nobody has to know about this shit. I could just hide this for fucking ever. Nobody has to know. And that took me 15 years to find out, of processing this, of why I never said anything, because people ask that all the time, and I don't know the answer, and I just found that out recently through processing all of this. So, because that day I had to tell this cop all of these things. And so I did, and we go back in the room, and he was real proud of me. we go back into the nurse's room, and there's like 8 people in this fucking room. There's like 8 or 9 people. And I'm pretty shaken up. I was crying a lot. And the nurse kind of walks over to me, and she gets down on a knee, and she puts her hand on my leg, and she says, Seth, you're brave and all these things. But she says, do you have any clothes, or do you have anything that you've worn to his house recently? And I said, well, I said, he just raped me about 15 hours ago, and I have not taken a shower. I have not changed my clothes. I still have everything on that I left his house with. And the silence in the room was deafening. I could just hear everybody's like jaws like drop, and they're just like, holy shit. They're like, oh my God, take your clothes off. They're like, let's test you. Let's get all this shit. And I'm sitting there. And I'm sitting there, and they do the test. They swab me, and they get his DNA, and they were blown away that this like 15-year-old kid was able to do this and like maintain his composure and handle it the way that I did, I guess. And they go up and they arrested him that night. They go up and they get him a couple hours later, and that whole story is a whole another long story. I've since gotten to find Chad couples and go back, and I got to go back to Ohio earlier this year and see Chad, and I called him and I said, hey man, I don't know if you know who I am. And he said, I told him, I said, my name's Seth Gale. I was like, I don't know if you remember who I am. And he said, fuck yeah, I remember you. And I was so scared to call him again because I was scared he's going to be upset with me for trying to reach out. But Chad was, he was just like, yeah, man, like, how are you doing? And I just told him, I was like, man, like, you have no fucking idea how much you mean to me. Because he was so fucking, like, nice, and he was calm, and he was just, I don't know, the way he handled himself, and he fucking went up there. And he got the guy to confess to a little bit. And I just told Chad, like, earlier this year, I just told him, I said, man, I want to meet you, and I want to shake your hand, and I told him... I told him, I said, man, I said, Chad, I'm married now. God damn it. I said, Chad, I said, I'm married now. I said, fuck. I don't ever cry when I talk about this. I said, Chad, I'm married now, and I said, man, I've got... I said, I have a beautiful wife. And I said, I have 2 fucking kids, man. I said, I got a son who's got just fucking beautiful little, like, blue eyes, and he's got blonde hair, and I got this little girl. This little girl who's so fucking proud of me, and she loves me to death, and I said, man, you have no fucking idea how much you mean to me. And I told him, I said, I've been thinking about you for 15 fucking years, man. And I've wanted to fucking call you so fucking bad. And I've just been so scared to talk to you because I didn't want to upset him. So... yeah. A few months after that, I got to go up to Ohio, and I got to meet him again, and I got to talk to him about his side of that day and what he did and how he handled that whole situation. But I just wanted to meet him and then tell him I was so thankful for him, because so many people that go through what I went through, they don't come out on the other end. So for me to have a wife and have kids and have a fucking family is, it's incredible. And, you know, about a month after I reported him, maybe a month or two, I hear that he accepted a plea deal. They offered him a plea deal. They offered Mondo a plea deal. He was charged with 11 counts, felony counts of sexual misconduct with a minor, because when I reported him, my friend Jacob, you know, like I said, he had also been molested and abused by him. And so it happened to both of us over the course of 10 years, about between the two of us. For me, it was about 5.5 years, maybe 300, 400 occasions of abuse, maybe more, probably more than that, probably 400 to 500 occasions. And the guy was offered a plea deal. And so he accepted it, and he took 4 counts of the 11, was sentenced to 10 years back in 2019, and he'd be free today. Fortunately enough, he died in prison in 2019. Died in prison in 2000 day. Fortunately enough, he died in prison in 2019.
How did he die?
Supposedly he died from a staph infection in prison. Yeah, I don't know the details of that. Later this year, I'm going up to Ohio to speak at a conference, and I'm actually speaking with Chad, the officer. He's speaking at a conference, and I'm speaking in my hometown with him. And when I go up there, I'm going to get the recorded interviews and interrogations that they had with Mondo. So I'll have that footage for myself. I have all the police reports. I have all of the pictures. I have all of the handwritten notes from the days that I reported him, and all of the things that Chad reported and took notes of and during the investigation. I have all that, so I'm trying to get as much detail as I can, because it's actually really brought me a lot of closure. But I really want to see the interrogations and see his final moments of like freedom, and I want to see what he had to say in that room, you know, because that was 15 years ago, and I just want other people to heal and like get over this shit, because it happens to so many people in the world. And these adverse childhood experiences that we have, it's the leading public health cost in America. The effects of childhood trauma, abuse, and neglect, the effects of those things are the leading public health cost. IV drug use, alcoholism, all the mental health, depression, suicide, all those things combined, when you add them all up, and a mass majority of that stems from childhood trauma and abuse and neglect. If we could just get rid of that, we would save literally trillions of dollars. I think the government spends $14 trillion, or has spent, treating the effects of an adverse childhood. And I am trying to help people overcome that trauma and adversity, because it's fucking hard, and you don't realize how painful it is. For years, you know, with my wife, she couldn't touch me, she couldn't grab me, she couldn't kiss me, I couldn't touch her, hold her, or kiss her, because what do you think about? You think about all these fucking things. You taste the person that had molested you and raped you. You smell them. I can smell the Old Spice that he fucking wore, you know. I can feel his hands all the time. So these things, like, they fuck up your life, and then, you know, now you have kids, and then you're raising kids, and then how am I supposed to be a father to 2 children when I never had a father, and all these bad things happen to me? What am I supposed to tell my kids when they ask, you know, where's your mom and where's your dad? And you know, my daughter asked me, why are you writing a book, Daddy? And I tell her, Daddy had a hard life, and I want to help other people not have a hard life, and understand that they're not alone, and that there's a way out. For me to have what I have, it's incredible. And there's, on the flip side of that, there's so many days, like even yesterday, I was thinking about, like, sometimes I just want to struggle and feel pain. And sometimes I want to quit my job, and I want to sell my house, and I just want to live in a 1-bedroom apartment and have nothing just so I can feel it again. I just want to feel that pain again. I just want to feel like that uncertainty in life. So I can imagine people that do go down the drug using routes and the abusive routes is chasing that high again, or chasing that feeling that they're so familiar with. And when you get something positive in your life, it doesn't make any fucking sense. And I've got a wife who's, God, I've tried to divorce her so many times. I've tried to leave her. I've literally told her, I said, I don't want to be with you anymore, multiple times. And she's got a family. She's got a father and a mother and brothers and sisters and a grandma who's like the fucking sweetest lady in the world. And I've told my wife several times, like, I don't want to do this, and I'm tired of this, and I can't do this. And she didn't walk out. She just basically said, fuck you, like, I'm staying. Like, I'm not leaving you, and, you're not leaving me. And God, I don't know why she did that, because I don't know what I have to offer her. I don't have anything. And even when we started dating, I told her, I said, if you want to marry me, I said, I'm fucked up, and like, you're gonna be on a hell of a fucking journey with me. And she told me, without even like questioning it, she said, what does that mean? Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care that you have problems. And she didn't know the extent of my problems, but she didn't give a fuck. She's just like, I don't care. And we got married within knowing each other for 6 months. I was in the Army. I was 21 or 22. We got married within knowing each other for 6 months. And we've been together for, I think, 8 years now. We have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. I own a home. I own 2 cars. I've won national construction awards. I've gone to Las Vegas and spoke on stages to room full of people who make too much fucking money. And they probably looked at me up on that stage like I was like this average man who just happened to work hard and found a good job. And when I was on that stage in Las Vegas speaking to receive this award, I wanted to tell all those people in that room, like, you have no fucking idea the path that I've taken to get where I'm at. Because when you go through these kind of experiences in life, when you walk into a room, you don't belong anywhere. You don't belong. I walked into this corporate job after being in the Army for 8 years. I've got tattoos. I've been to combat. I've seen all kinds of different places of the world. And when I walked into this corporate job, I see people with moms and dads and families and husbands and wives and kids, and they're fucking happy. And you just have this resentment, this deep resentment for the world. And you just think, like, you motherfuckers have no fucking idea what it's like. And you fucking assholes are mad because your fucking coffee's like 3 minutes fucking late. And you just have this deep hate. And so when I was on that stage in Las Vegas, I just wanted to let all these people know, like, how much that award meant to me. Because if I could go back and tell that kid at 13 years old who's getting fucking raped, like, just fucking hang on, man. Like, you're gonna fucking make it. I know you don't fucking believe it now, but you're gonna fucking make it, and you're gonna do incredible things in this world. And now I'm writing a fucking book about it all, Now I'm like be a fucking published author soon. I've served my country for 8 years, been all around the world. I've seen all kinds of different places. Had a combat tour in 2019 to Afghanistan. Spent 9 months away from my basically newborn daughter and wife, and came home, got out, got into the construction industry. I've done very well. Started writing a book, started speaking, started telling my story. And I'm just just getting started. I'm only 30 years old, and I want to just be a light for the world and for the people that are watching this happen. I've gone and done things, and I'm going to continue to push myself. I'm going to continue to push into the fire. There's no sense in going through this fire and like sticking that like raw piece of iron into the heat, into the flame, and it gets hot and it gets red. When you take it out, like, you've got to strike it and you've got to make a difference. You've got to like change what's been damaged. Otherwise it's going to get cold and it's going to remain the same that it was when it went in. So if you don't work on yourself and test yourself and push yourself, like, it's very hard to get out of that. And so that's what I'm trying to do now. And like I said, that's why I'm writing a book. That's why I tell my story, and
talking about it is helpful.
It is. It's incredibly helpful. The things that you do in life are impressive, but when people find out like there's a fucking backstory to all this shit. I recently ran a 100-mile race a couple months ago, and when I ran that race, I crossed that finish line, and the last like 30 fucking miles was fucking miserable, but I kept fucking telling myself, like, I went through 16 years of absolute hell and misery as a child. Like, I can just keep going another mile. And so that's what I tell myself now as an adult, is like just like another fucking day, another fucking week, another month. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, and I'm just real proud of myself and real proud of the life that I have. And
you should be.
Thank you.
Seth, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're incredibly strong.
Thank you. Ah, motherfuck. Ah, motherfuck.
I have too.
Fucking A. God, I don't ever cry.
A few months ago, I had a lot of stuff in my personal life going on, and it triggered all my childhood trauma. And I went back to therapy.
Seems I'm overdue on commending you for your efforts. After all, you've been doing such a good job of... to this point that you got noticed by the North Lot Village Council. Doesn't that make you happy? I know it does. And right after they noticed you, they asked if you could help solve their problems. Ain't fame grand? For now, it's nothing too hard. Just check the nearby radio tower for damage. Seems like something's wrong with it. Yes, I know you knew it was going to happen. And no, they are definitely not flooding my desk with more requests as we speak. Because that's never happened to us before, right?